Hello, guys. Welcome. You thought I was going to be on and not have put Tracy on, right? We fooled you guys now. We got you guys. We both coming on at the same time. Yeah,
We
she
got to
knows
keep
she's
you
my
guys on your
co-host.
toes.
Got to keep you guys on the toes because I can't have any foolishness. So we got to make sure that you guys on your toe. Thanks, Dan. Dan has reminded us that it's 3 minutes past the hour and he's feeling vulnerable. I appreciate you,
That's
Dan. I
all my fault,
appreciate
guys. I
you. I
got caught up
appreciate you,
and
Dan.
excited and talking to
That's
Carl
okay. This
Shawn
is
while
what
we were
we do.
backstage.
Welcome. Yes. Welcome to another edition of the Authentic Leadership 101. And if you guys have been in class, also you collegiate people, you're ending your what was it, fall semester. Yeah, and you're getting ready to go into spring. So we're also in our fall semester of giving you this authentic leadership. We're ending our semester. We're also prepping for 2022. We just came out of a fabulous contabulous. I'm just trying to think of a whole lot of words that sound nice. Bonanza that we had with the peeps. Yes, we did. Dan was also a part of that. And we appreciate you guys coming up. But we're talking about something that we kind of ended with a great conversation within in the bonanza, and we got to talking about conversations and creating safe spaces. And did you guys know that through authentic leadership you can create safe spaces? And I don't know if anybody knew that besides me and Tracy, but I'm sure you guys knew that as well. You can create those safe spaces for conversation as an authentic leader. Hey, and even if that's not your title, you could also create those safe spaces. And we just want to talk about that because it was very unique how we started talking about that and how it just kind of like mazed itself on into the authentic leadership part. And I just thought it was a great topic. And so did Tracy. And here we are. We're talking about it. So, Trace, I've been
Here
talking
we are.
enough for right now. What's going on with you?
Well, I also want to remind all of you guys watching live that
Yes,
get in the comments. This is a conversation for all of us. So thank you, Dan,
absolutely.
for starting the show with your vulnerability.
Yes,
I do know
yes,
that there were some of you joining us today or planning to join us today who were also part of the Bonanza, who were really excited to continue this conversation about conversations because
yes.
there's so many times. So for those of you who don't know Tara Argo, you should connect with her on LinkedIn. But if you don't know her, she often uses the phrase sit at the table. And one of the things that was really top of mind for me when I think about that concept is that, well, what table do I want to sit at? And why have I been afraid to, like, I'll just use afraid, straight up afraid to speak my piece when I'm sitting at a specific table? And there are many things that are attached to those things. But if this is what we want to talk about today. So if you guys are here and you have questions or you have experiences or you have comments about where is this conversation I want to belong to,
Where?
maybe that's where you're at. Or maybe it's that, like, yeah, I am like constantly, every time I go to the boardroom table for a group meeting, I'm like really uncomfortable and I don't feel like I can speak up. So I think, look, we're going to talk about those two pieces specifically today. But if you guys have anything else in that arena, Dan wants to sit at whatever table gets the hot dogs first.
Yes, Dan. Which one
Agree.
have the little hot dogs, Dan? I don't know what the little hot dogs are, but
Just
I think
FYI, your business
yes.
peeps table gets the hot dogs first.
Yes, Dan. And hopefully they won't be little, Dan. So we'll make sure that we get some
No, like
sizable hot
the
dogs.
foot long
Yeah, the ones hang out the
baseball
buns.
field
Yeah,
hot
yeah,
dogs.
yeah. When the mustard get on your nose from biting it, you know what I mean?
That's the good stuff.
That's the good stuff.
Yeah. So we just want to encourage you guys to get in the comments so we can talk about the things that are top of mind most for you guys as
Yes,
well. So Carl Shawn,
yes.
have you had tables that you've sat at in the past where you felt uncomfortable participating in the conversation?
Oh, I didn't feel uncomfortable. I take that. I didn't feel uncomfortable. I made people uncomfortable. So I was, because a lot of people say sitting at the table, and I want my seat at the table. Um, and I hear a lot of people say that, but what does that truly mean? Is that under the understanding that you want to be able to be sort of like the Hamilton play in the room where it happens? Because I mean, you
Love
could
that
be in
song.
the room where it happens. I've been in many rooms where it happened, but I wasn't sitting at the table. So when I'm thinking of sitting at the table, I'm looking at it from a point of empowerment from my voice or my perspective. That's really the table that we're talking about, and well, that's the table that I vision. And I've sat at the tables a lot of times. I sat in the meeting that's went on, and I could not say anything, or the meeting that's went on, and it was just a verbal tongue lashing, so to speak, from the higher ups based upon things that wasn't getting done or accomplished, which I always hate. And I always sent the emails out afterward that if I wasn't involved in that meeting, it was nothing that really affected me and my job performance. Why I had to attend that meeting. I always had a problem with that because they would like call meetings for like the entire like sections or segments of the departments, and it'd be one person that everyone knew who they were referring to, but they gave this full on blast meeting and took up a lot of my time, which I didn't like anyway. But anyway, I digress. But when we talk about these conversations or being at the table, that's my firm belief that being at the table is not only being able to sit in these locations and sit in these arenas, but are your points being taken? Are your perspectives being respected? And anything that you're bringing to the table, thought wise, innovation wise, design wise, whatever your whatever your call or whatever your job is or your occupation is, are people in those rooms or are those people at the tables that you're in, are they allowing your voice to be heard? And this is where creating the safe spaces of conversations really fall on the leader's perspective. Because if you're not allowing these conversations to have, I don't say fester because it's a wrong term to use. If you don't let these conversations cultivate amongst employees who are working most of the time commonly on the same goal, how did you get the innovation about creating a place where I feel okay to say something? Because a lot of times you go into that, and maybe so I'm thinking a little bit outside the box here, or maybe not. A lot of times you get into these conversations and people won't say what they say because the reading of the room has been, oh man, that's going to sound stupid. Oh man, they don't listen to me anyway. How many times have you been in this kind of situation where you might have had something very good to add, but by it not being a created safe space for you to have this talk or this conversation or this ideal, you kind of held it or sat on it or secretly passed it to someone else to say and give. And, you know, those are the things that we're dealing with when we're saying, hey, do you want to sit at the table? That's what I think of anyway.
Yeah, and it's really interesting for me. So I'll share with you. One of the Bonanza participants had reached out to me. Hi, Jeff. Had reached out to me after the Bonanza and had asked me, how do you facilitate such an open conversation, right? So we had a bunch of panel sessions as part of the Bonanza, and she was just like, everyone was just like having conversations, and they like, nobody is attacking anybody. People are having like differing opinions, but like, how do you create that space where people are actually like just in it for the conversation? And it was the first time I really thought about it, to be honest with you. And then what I thought was, it does have a lot to do with the people at the table, right?
Yes.
And the people at the table, specifically during the Bonanza, had two specific. Oh, I can't talk about. This is Monday before Christmas, you guys. Whatever. Two specific things that came to mind: open-mindedness and curiosity. And so and I want to talk specifically about curiosity from the point of authentic leadership, because a lot of times, and I've experienced this myself in managers and quote unquote leaders in my life, is that there's this ego. They have an ego that prevents them from being curious and open-minded. Like, I think those two things, they do really end up going hand in hand. Yeah. Because if you're always concerned that your team, if your teammate or your subordinate, I hate that word, but the people who report to you have a great idea, and all you can feel is that wasn't my idea, I need to steal it, or I need to make sure people don't think that person is smarter than me, or any of those things. Like, you don't have that. You don't have that curiosity. You don't have that open-mindedness. As long as your ego is in control, ego wins. And I did this really interesting exercise once with a coach where she asked us to name our ego, because we all have one. We all have an ego. There is a way to start to recognize when your ego is talking and it's not really you, it's your ego talking. So I like to call mine Voldemort, because nobody likes it when Voldemort is around. And sorry if you guys don't know Harry Potter, but he's the bad guy in Harry Potter. And so like I can tell when something like a reaction that I'm having is based on my ego, and I can be like, oh, Voldemort is back. Let's get rid of him and get back into curiosity and open-mindedness in this conversation, because it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, a leader represents the entire team, but you aren't all members of that team. You're not supposed to do everybody's job. Your job is to lead the people and letting those people have ideas and conversations. And I'm a big believer in that. The best ideas come from talking it out, from conversations, because then you get to influence what you think with what someone else thinks, and then you can come up with something that's completely new. If you're just doing it yourself, you only ever have your own thoughts. And my own thoughts are like, okay, but they're not as good as they could be if
not collectively
learned new things. And so when it comes to, and I'd love to hear you guys that are here watching live sharing too, like what are some of the differences that you've seen when either you show up to a conversation with curiosity, or you've experienced someone else who shows up in a conversation with curiosity? Because we're not, let's be honest, like Carl, Shawn, and I, we have a lot of things in common. We agree on a lot of things. We don't agree on everything. We haven't come across a lot of them, but
and it's honestly speaking, it's not just because we do the show together. It's just like, I don't kind of like, I like difference, but I don't thrive with difference. If you can understand that, when I'm working with someone, it's not that I don't, I don't want this to be misconstrued and taken the wrong way. Difference to me more goes along with value wise, not difference in any other arena. So I don't want to Carl Shawn said he's different. He don't like different people. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying when your values don't align with mine, then we have issues. And that's regardless of whatever title was given to you or whatever title you want to thrust on your own self. When your values don't align with mine, we don't really have nothing to say. So I have worked with people who values don't, and it has just been plenty of just work platonic relationship that we were on a common goal. We was on the same team and we had a mission and we did that mission. So that was it. But there are some that I carry on with that values align with mine, and we have conversation and we create safe space and we do those things because I don't have to agree with you. There's a lot of people that values align with mine, but don't necessarily agree with my viewpoints. And it's okay. That's their perspective and it's their privilege to have that right? So when I think about that,
I mean, one of the things that we talked about when we were talking about our 5 pillars of authentic leadership was values.
The pillars. Let's get the pillars.
And just like, this is one of the things that people forget, right? When you show up and you take action, the actions that you take actions that you take can be misaligned with your values. Every time you take an action that is misaligned with your values, you will feel it. You'll feel that like gut, like, ooh, like this isn't what I would do. And this is just one of the things I remember happening to me so many times in my corporate career, was just thinking like, I wouldn't do that. If I was making the decision, that's not what I would do. And I didn't have enough knowledge about my own personal values when I was in corporate to be able to understand why that's not what I would do. Like, okay, is this bumping up against quite honestly, I'm sure it was bumping up against my authenticity value quite often. But like, it just doesn't feel like that is true. It feels like it's fake. And like, for those of you who don't know me, I came from the marketing industry. So there's a lot of fakeness that happens.
Fake news.
In there's a lot of it that happens in that industry. People, they think you just spend a lot of money, be creative, be flashy, and you sell stuff, right? And it's just, the unfortunate thing is that works for a lot of products. And it's annoying because it's not, there's no like feel good about it. Anyway, but when your values aren't aligned with a space, the likelihood of you being able to feel comfortable participating in that conversation is very low. If you feel like your values are completely aligned with people in that space, and this is why I think people feel like it's so easy to come and talk in a networking event in the Your Business Peeps community, is that like we all at the values level believe the same things. And so when I come up, I'm actually less afraid to be vulnerable. So I can practice showing up in a vulnerable way because I'm not afraid of that. Now, that does not mean that if you come to Your Business Peeps and feel really safe, or I'm just using Your Business Peeps as an example, you might have another space or another community where it feels safe for you to participate in the conversation. That doesn't mean that every space will feel equally safe to you participate in the conversation. So what I encourage you guys to look for in that scenario is what about that environment? So what about the people, or what about the space doesn't align with your values? And it might come down to, again, one of the things that it came down to for me was that the values that the company had written on the wall were not the values that they showed up and lived every day. So I was very aligned with the values written on the walls, but it didn't seem like most of the other people who worked there were. And so it was really hard for me. But one of the things, so again, if you guys don't know Lindsay Harl-Cadets, you should also follow her. She talks a lot about values. Pretty much everything she does is related to values. But I just participated in her Voracious Values workshop last week. Again, highly recommend you guys take it if you haven't. She offers it pretty regularly through her LinkedIn account. And it just is one of the concepts that she explores in that is your definition of a value, right? So let's just take this event is called Authentic Leadership. Let's take authentic as our sample value here.
Yeah, that's just might as well.
Yeah. So my definition of authentic is different than Carl's definition of authentic, is different than Jeff's, is different than Dan's, right? Like all of you guys have if I say the word authentic, you guys have different response. We actually even had one of the experts who spoke on as part of the Bonanza who was like, I do not resonate with the word authentic. I think it's overused, and every time I hear it, it just feels fake. Like there's fakeness associated with it. And that's because of its uses mostly on social media. But I can't control its uses on social media, right? I can only control what it means to me. And so let's just assume we're all working for the same company, and authenticity is the value, the company value, right? Here's the problem. My definition of authenticity is different than Carl Shawn's, and different than Dan's, and different than every one of you who is here. And unless you have alignment created from a conversation on what those things mean, you don't get to participate. Like you don't feel like the comfort, let's just say this, the comfort level of you entering into that conversation doesn't exist yet because you don't know that we're aligned. And so being able to have a really clear definition of what your values mean to you, and then being able to have a conversation with somebody based on that. So now I want to talk a little bit about one-on-one conversations versus group conversations as well. Yes. Because we've been talking in general so far about group conversations. Most people feel more comfortable in a one-on-one conversation. Mm-hmm. Quite honestly, I feel more comfortable in a one-on-one conversation. It's fun for me. It's a different feeling that I get when I'm in a group conversation, and there's a different amount of talking that happens on my behalf in each of those things, but there's also different mental processing that happens. So if I'm going to have a one-on-one conversation with Carl Shawn, I'm totally comfortable with Carl Shawn. I could tell him anything, right? I could tell him anything about anything. I am not worried about him judging me. It's just safe zone. It's safe
I
zone.
create safe spaces.
Good job, man. And I'm sure each of us has those people, right? So again, likely those people, whether it's really been spoken about in a clear way or not, have an underlying level of values alignment with you that makes it easy and feel safe for you to be with those people. And so being able to just like look at that a little more inquisitively and say like, ooh, okay, like, yeah, I do feel really safe with Tracy and Carl Shawn, or I do feel really safe with my spouse, or I do feel really safe with my sister or coworker or my boss, right? Like you might be one of the lucky ones and have a boss that you feel totally safe to talk to. Just investigate that a little bit. What makes that person feel so comfortable for you? And then you can start to look at those spaces where you don't have that comfort level and potentially see, right? Like, oh yeah, well, I really don't speak up in my team work environments because remember that one time that one guy did and he got like totally reamed out.
Trying to get traumatized.
Right. Trying to keep myself safe. And you guys, this is exactly an experience I had. I think so. The company I worked for at the time, I hadn't worked there for a year for sure. And we did this team event. And you could tell that some of the people were not into it, right? Like it was team coaching kind of thing. And I worked for a software company. So the developers were kind of just like, meh, right? Like not interested. And at the end of the event, we all stood in a circle. This was what we were instructed to do and provide our feedback. Honest feedback was what was asked for. So one of the developers provided his honest feedback that he thought the event was a waste of time and that his time would have been better spent if he could have
doing something else, right,
at the office and done his work. Which, quite honestly, for him, knowing
probably
who that person was, probably would have been a better.
He was honest with what he said
and money. He was not like he was kind of frustrated, I would say, when he shared it, but he was not mad or irate or like he didn't sound
so agitated
or anything. He was sharing his feedback. Truth. And like quite honestly, I thought it was really brave of him. I really enjoyed the event, so I shared that, but he didn't, and I thought it was brave of him to say that he didn't. My boss asked him to leave. She told him to go home and come back when he had cooled down. So what is everybody in the room? The entire team was there for that. Right? It's not like she asked him to do that on her own after the like after we had all dispersed again in front of everybody. And so what is everybody's response? It's not safe for me to tell the truth. And it was demonstrated a couple of times in different actions that like I've been invited to tell the truth, but it's not safe for me to tell the truth. So I'm not going to. It's not safe to do so. And so again, like I didn't know as much about my own values as I do now. One of the things that I see really clearly now is that like, okay, well, that was fake, right? She was asking me for something, but we didn't really she didn't really want it. And so like, that's just fake to me. Don't pretend you want our feedback if you don't want our feedback, right? Like if you don't care, don't ask for it. And I also worked in marketing research for a really long time. So it was really funny for me because I always told clients, like, don't ask people something. Don't ask people for information you're not going to do anything with.
This is Alonzo. He makes a good point. Mr. De Jesus, misuse of the word authentic, which is widely used and of those who don't understand its meaning, and shouldn't be discounted. Meaning shouldn't discount its true definition. This applies online and offline, and I definitely agree with that. And that's why I use that. That's why I don't use that word in the essence of, well, most of the time when I use that word, I try to put a definition behind it, because I think everybody's definition of what authentic is kind of marred, and it's marred based upon actually examples of what you just said. I've been in many meetings when they said, okay, we're going to have a heart to heart, or we're going to have where, everyone can share their feelings. And I have not, and I'm comfortable with sharing my feelings with anybody at any point, any place. I've just lived that truth so long. I don't have hesitance. I'm not going to tell you everything, but I know what to tell you, when to tell you. So when I think of someone tells me, when someone opens with that, 9 times out of 10, that's safe. That space is not safe to do that. And I've read that from being in those situations for so many times, for so many years, that when people ask you that, they really don't want to hear that. And I think this is really what, when I'm thinking about what Alonzo is saying here, because people get their word authentic. And I know from the streets, and being a street guy, you say authentic is the real, right? The brothers be like, yeah, you got to give them the real. You got to. What does the real mean? The real, I've talked to people before. What is the real to you? Being belligerent, being ignorant, not tactful. Does that mean that it's real? I mean, I can be just as real with you and articulate and explain to you what I feel notoriously concerning you and your behavior. Like I can say that to you, and I don't have to be belligerent. I don't have to be tactful. I don't have to be distasteful. I can tell you all of that, still smile and carry on a conversation where I wouldn't even draw attention to myself. So when we think about authentic and what it really is, that's what that area. It wasn't creating a safe space, and by her saying that to enhance that kind of communication, she really defeated the purpose of even having that communication, because she just gave everybody a reason to say, you know what, you can't be authentic here. I'll just come in the meeting the next time and won't say anything.
Well, and this is actually, so Kenneth is asking, like, then why ask? Because people think they should.
Yeah.
Right. So a leader.
Oh, then he tells me don't ask. Okay. He said, why?
Yeah.
Then he tells me don't. Okay.
But you're right. Like, and they ask it because they think they should. Right. Because it, again, like one of the examples, I think I've shared this a couple of times on this show before, but like my boss used to always do the clearing round. Same boss. And so for those on a management team, we have 5 minutes of clearing round before the beginning of like our management meetings to make sure that everybody's in the space to be able to have these conversations. Yes. It's a great idea, right? I think it's a really good idea, except for when someone shared what was actually going on for them. And like, you guys, this is not, and this is, we miss so much of the, like the humanness of going to work, right? Like this guy, his wife was waiting to hear back on whether or not she had cancer. And he's just like waiting for a phone call from her. And like, that sucks. That is terrible. That guy, he should have taken the day off. If it was me as his boss, I would have said, you should go home. Go home and wait with her. Right. And like, if you need to be on call, right? But like, it's just, it's crazy. And she was like, no, that's not what I mean. Like, what do you mean?
I don't think that.
If that's not what you mean.
The meeting was a waste of time after all. I'm with the kid.
Yeah. It's crazy, right? Like, anyway, it boggles my mind, right? You're right. Don't ask, right? Don't ask if you don't care. And people think they should care. And in my opinion, they probably should, but I don't like to should on people. Like, if you don't care, don't pretend to care, right? Because that is way worse. If you didn't care what was going on with people and you didn't ask people for a clearing round at the beginning of a meeting, nobody would know the difference, right? No. If we're going to invite someone into that conversation and then tell them no, don't invite them. I'm with Kenneth on this one, right? Don't invite them. Just invite them. And this is, you guys, we talk a lot about this when we come to like my definition of authentic is about, it's like not pretending you have values that you don't have, right? There's no good value, inherently good or inherently bad values. So let's just say your organization is about innovation over and above anything else. Like your biggest desire in life is to innovate, to come up with something new, to be ahead of the market, to be blah, blah, blah. Don't pretend that caring about people is your value if it's not, right? Like tell people that you're about innovation, and the people who are also about innovation will want to go and work there. Probably a bunch of young people who don't have families and things like that. And that's fine, right? Like, but just be honest. And the first step in being honest with other people, first step in creating safe spaces for conversation, which involves other people, be honest with yourself. Stop lying to yourself.
I mean, we've heard that like all of our lives, right? And I'm pretty sure everyone before they got the yeah, I can smell it too, Kenny. Everyone before they got to the process of being what can I say? If everyone that they've gotten before the process of being an expert liar, I'll use that. So many other terms came to mind when I thought about the lying part, but I'll say professional. When they became to be an expert liar, at some point in time during the process of you being raised, I think I can say about 99.9 of us was probably raised with some kind of morality as right or wrong, right? At some point in juncture, if it wasn't so much taught in the home, once you went to a school environment, it probably was taught to some extent. In work, it's taught to some extent. And the gravity of it is that majority of it is always manipulated, right? So people don't really understand when and I used to do this when my kids were growing up. I used to play with them and then get serious like and I used to do that with them off and on. Like we'll just be in the midst of a joke or just whatever, and then I would just instantly turn to a serious face. And I did it to keep them all balanced, but I also did it to know that things I used to build up. Yeah, I was kind of a crazy parent. I used to build up this thing in them to let you know that things could change at any moment. So this was my teaching. I'm just educated, always got stuff going on in my mind kind of guy. So I always created that awareness for them that yes, it could be nice right now, but at any point it could twist. And I did that a lot with the way that I dealt and played with them, right? So when I think about it, now they have the tendency of when things, which really worked out on my behalf, they're very adaptable. Like I raised adaptable kids just with that exercise. Now, when things don't go, it's not a big, it's not, oh my God, the cat jumped off the building. It's not one of those kind of things. It's like, so when we talk about that and we put in the authentic part, there's nothing created there where people can say, okay, is she playing? Is she for real? It kind of lends to that where I can't be safe in this conversation because I have no idea where this conversation will go. Will I be embarrassed by what I say, or will I be made a mockery of the things I bring up? And a lot of times I've been in meetings where this is actually taking place. Someone is snarled or said something concerning what someone implied and said. And now you don't have that safe space there and you don't have the innovation because people can't be true and we don't give them the opportunity to. Because when people are being true and they're trying to be real, they're railroaded with either, what are you talking about that for here at work? I've heard that before. That don't belong here. Why are you talking about that? They don't belong here. Someone is saying something concerning something that may have happened to their home, so they have to go home. Well, you should take care of that before you get to work. We don't give those opportunities for people to be real. So we've sucked that air out. So now people have to play, they have to play real. Okay, yeah, that's really what I meant. When all actuality, that's not what they meant. So we're really diffusing the purpose of talking about creating safe spaces when we aren't even being totally honest with ourselves. And if you ask a lot of people in their workplaces that they work at and where they are, if they're really being honest with themselves, 9 times out of 10, they're probably not comfortable there. And it's probably for one of these things.
This is the really interesting point too, because when it comes to the concept of knowing yourself, what you'll also start to see is that some of those limitations you've created for yourself in a conversation are because of you, not necessarily because
majority of them probably are.
And and the reason why I say that is that there is a way for you to build your confidence in being able to stand up in situations like that, assuming that you might get railroaded, right? Like, okay, I have seen people railroaded in the past. I might get railroaded in this conversation. And I know that doesn't have anything to actually do with me, but there are everything to do with the other party, right? And yes, I like how you put that. Is that Alonzo again? EQ deficient?
No, that's Anna. Anna is the
That's Anna.
YouTube LinkedIn user. I'm seeing her on my iPad, so I'm responding. I responded to her so we can see her name. Anna, thank
Yeah.
you for your participation. But she makes a good point. It's amazing to me that that there are that many people in leadership out there that are this EQ deficient, and they really are. And I gotta give, I gotta go with a 50-50% that a lot of them don't know it. They've been doing that for so long, it's become customary, it's become
Well,
ordinary, it's
we just
become,
don't, it's not taught in enough scenarios, right? Like
yeah.
you might be lucky. Like I consider my son lucky because he has a parent who is a personal branding coach. And
Oh
so
wow.
I constantly explore these things and what my responses are telling him in terms of about him, right?
Mhm.
Like, and like Kenneth, I don't know that it's necessarily brain deficiency. I think that just like a lot of people don't, we don't get taught it, right? We
And we
get
take for
taught
granted that people
hard
know. I know
facts.
that really goes on a lot in corporate. We take for granted that people understand, and
And
then
we don't ask, like,
yeah,
this,
I was
how
gonna say
many
that too.
leadership applications do people put in? It doesn't have anything to do with your EQ, right? Like, it doesn't, most of it doesn't have to do, it has to do with the number of years you've been in a position. Doesn't matter if you spent 20 years being a shitty leader, right? Like, we're just,
At least
you
you've
had
been there 20 years. That's the
20
point.
years. So that's the thing that counts, right? Like, it was funny because I was having a conversation with my husband today. He works in middle management for like a really big organization. And one of his teammates has transitioned. So transitioned into a new job. They used to run everything. He works in transportation. They used to run everything like east and west, and now they've put everything under one umbrella. So this guy who is
Cool.
very familiar with how to run things in the east is now responsible for east and west and has no idea how we do it
To
in the
do
west.
things in the West. Yeah, that makes
And
sense. That's what management does, right?
right. And so it just is, there's just too much human complexity here to just be like, this guy sucks at his job, right? Like, you can't say that. You have to, like, this guy's been thrown into this new job. Has he been given the opportunity to train with the right people? Has he even been given the clarity and what's different about his new job versus his old job, right? Like, he's clearly trying to manage it exactly how he did before. And is somebody telling him that that's not what people are expecting? Because if he doesn't know that, like, you guys might be equally frustrated with him, and then he might go home and feel totally frustrated with himself because he doesn't know how to do this job, right? And it's just like so
Sure,
annoying
kid.
that
Yeah.
we, and this is where we're talking about conversations, right? Like, if
Yeah.
that guy doesn't feel like he can go to his boss and be like, hey, I've noticed that there's like some pushback
Yeah.
from the
Something
team when
going
I'm
on.
trying to get the support I thought was what I could get from these people. And it's just like, and I can't, like, you guys, we can't, nobody can be productive at a job unless you
Yeah.
can have these conversations. And it's
And
just
Anna
really
brings that up.
important to understand your ability to drive that conversation, because not everybody knows to even look for the opportunity to have that conversation. And yeah, there's just a whole bunch
You
of
do.
people who are not EQ savvy because we don't
Yeah.
help them, we don't help them build those skills, right? We send them into a corporate working environment. I will tell you, I worked in corporate working environments for 18 years. Not once did anybody give me any kind of training opportunity or something that was related to EQ. I was lucky that, you know, randomly I did, this was something I was always interested in. I wrote my extended essay in high
Oh
school
wow.
about emotional intelligence, right? Like, it's just something that I have always been interested in. But you don't learn that in school. You know, I learned that because I was interested in it and just decided to study it myself,
Curiosity. Yeah.
right?
I think.
But
I
that it
think.
drives
Yeah.
back to being open-minded and being curious.
And it's definitely it's definitely important. Anna hits it on, and I like hear what she says in the essence of she never had a conversation with her APs or the leadership, right? Like, she was
Yeah.
afraid of being called out or embarrassed. Now that sets the stage for what we're really talking about here. It's not a safe space for a conversation
Well, and
because
here's the other thing,
if
because
you're
we've had this conversation before too, right? Like, as the
Mhm.
leader, So as a leader, I have the opportunity to create the space. But Anna, people are coming into your space with that background, same background you have, right? In 10 years, I've maybe talked to one person. So there's like corporate trauma associated with this, that as a leader, it takes some time to create that feeling, right? People are coming into it and just, they already have the mindset that work is not a safe space for me to talk about things, right? Like I'm going to get railroaded. And that might not be because of you. That might be because of other experiences they had. It might have been because a teacher in school used to railroad them. It might be because their parents do that or siblings do that, right? And so when it comes to, I just wanted to bring this up because we've talked about it at least in one other episode, but we can create the space and you can't force another person to use it. Just like somebody could think that they're creating the space for you and you are dealing with those kinds of stories in your head. It's not safe to do so. And it's stopping you from doing it. The leader's not stopping you from doing it. You're stopping you from doing it. And I always think about this in my, like the scenario I always think of for me is that in my last company, I don't know why I was there for 8 years when I talk about it this way. There were lots of good things as well. But there were a lot of members of the other members of the management team. They never got their KPIs submitted on time. Never. They're supposed to be done, like submitted by Monday. And like almost all of them were doing it on Tuesday, right before the meeting. And it drove me nuts. And I always said like it bumped up against my accountability value. And the thing in my head that I always thought about them at the time was that they're just not accountable, right? They don't have accountability. Accountability is nothing they care about. But in retrospect, when I think about the definitions of values, probably they had a different definition of what accountable is than I do. And that makes a difference, right? Like I'm measuring them on my definition of accountability, but if they have a different definition of accountability, then it's not really fair. And it would have been totally possible for me to have that conversation with them and say like, okay, guys, this is what I'm experiencing. Based on my definition of accountability, I need to discuss what this looks like for everybody else because it's clearly not equally driving everybody else nuts. I need to talk about it, right? Like it wasn't not, and I don't know, I might have got railroaded, but I think that there was space for me to at least bring up, to at least attempt to have the conversation.
But it has to be
at the same time, I have a lot more confidence in myself now than I had when I was actually working in that corporate job and kind of got like stomped on every day.
Yeah, I think we have to when I think about the safe spaces that need to be created for conversation, I go straight to cultural, and that's the only place that I can lay that blame, because the culture is bigger than the ones that's living in the culture, right? Because the culture manifests as the behavior of those inhabitants of the culture. So if we're looking at the individuals that is within this culture and they're not manifesting what the culture should be about, then there has to be some picking out of the cultures. How it continues to manifest and continue on in those, I call them unstable areas, is that leaders tend to not want to push the boundaries of culture and they're satisfied in the status quo of the culture. So when I look at it as creating a safe space, that is all proponent upon, yes, it's harder. It's harder, and I won't even say it's harder. I take that back. I refuse to say that. It's not harder for a leader to create the culture. It's actually the responsibility of the leader to create the culture. And when I say that, you can say, oh, you have this big company and this is because everybody goes to this, right? And if everybody give up on things that they know is right, then the whole world will be wrong. So someone has to take a stand at some point in place and say, okay, this is not working. Now, will you be that individual? A lot of times there's a scaredness of you being the total individual to actually do that. And leadership is a lot of it. And that's just they basing everything on bottom dollar, bottom line, numbers, performance. When they follow those matrix ends, which actually have nothing to do with it, studies and plenty of studies that I've done and plenty that I've been in participating in or reading in. When there's an unhealthy culture, there is no innovation, creativity, or performance peaks in companies. It's like written all across the board. It's like written like, whiteboard with black chalk or black marker, whatever you write on the board, right? So it's written on there for you to understand. Mike makes a great point when I'm talking about that. It takes transparency, vulnerability, objective listening, and emotional maturity to create a safe space. Now, those are all definitions. Yeah, I use that term. They're all definitions of what it takes to create a safe space. But one person doesn't have to maintain all of those avenues. If I'm creating it and I'm starting with transparency, all of those things that you mentioned, they are contagious because transparency encourages transparency. Vulnerability encourages vulnerability. Objective listening, if everyone's doing that, that rubs off. Emotional maturity, yeah, I don't know. That's pretty much not contagious. That has to be grown.
But all of these things, they're skills that need to be practiced.
Absolutely.
Right? We can't, like, if you don't have a space to practice these things. I love, Michael, that you shared transparency.
Yeah, that's one of my greatest
things that, in my experience, was the biggest struggle in the leadership is what they kept to themselves or what they shared with specific parties, and that the transparency wasn't there. And the thing that I always ask myself is,
they share with the clique. You weren't part of the clique.
You want people to know this, right? Like, if I have an entire client success team that can sell things, and they're actually quite good at selling things because they already have really good relationships with the client, why would you not tell me how far we're tracking behind in sales? Maybe I could make up for that if we knew it, right? But like, no, those guys don't get to be privy to financial information. Only management level people can. Well, they can't. That's dumb because I can't help you then. Like, having that lack of transparency just allows people to not help you and not work towards what you're trying to work towards. That doesn't make sense, right? So it just is all of these things. Like, Shawn could speak, we all know this, about vulnerability for a very long time, but you have to practice it, right?
Yes, that's why I can speak at it, because I practice at it. And then I tell people that it's really not the object of it is, and it's so people put so much weight on the negative of it. And I was talking to a client earlier today when I was not trying to convince, but trying to dispel the myth of it. It's like they just jumped out the dictionary with me, and we know we talked so many times about this dictionary, which I can stand. We talk about this. We talk about the dictionary has proclaimed in bigness and in one definition that it encourages exposure and harm, right? So when anyone reads that, this is what they equate it with, whether that applies to your life or not. You've been vulnerable and it has hurt you many times.
Actually, I have been vulnerable and it's helped me almost every time.
Yeah. Oh my God. Ding, 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 ding. I feel like you were just on the Price is Right.
Well, I can't think of a single time in the right room, because I have been that person too, right? Like, I'm not going to tell my boss this, but I will also tell you. So I have had bosses I struggle with. I have bosses that have also been amazing. And I tell them, like, I had this one amazing boss, and he was just like, just the pinnacle of it, cares about people, right? Like, seriously, I don't even know if he did anything else. I'm sure he did reporting and things like that as the vice president, but what he did, in my opinion, was just know all the people and help them reach their career goals and do their jobs as best as possible. And this is what he did for whatever, I don't know, as a medium-sized company. So his team was maybe, 10 people, 12 people. And that's what he did. That's all. Again, I don't know. That's all he did. That's my experience of him. That's what he did. That's the impression he left on me. And when I handed in my resignation to him, I resigned because I couldn't live in the city I was living in anymore, and I had to move. I cried because it was just like I did not want to leave that company. I did not want to leave that boss. I liked my job. I had like, he kept helping me grow in terms of my leadership potential. It was just, I cried, and I still am in contact with him. Neither of us work for that company anymore. And I still, if anybody asked me best leader I ever had, hands down him, hands down, Mike Cowan, high five to you, my friend,
High
because
five, Mike.
a lot of people don't get that. And in the other,
The majority of the people don't get that.
I know the other relationships that I had were not that. And some of them were not terrible. Some of them were, I wouldn't say any of them were like really terrible, but some of them were not. They weren't good for me, right? They weren't good for me. And I don't think they cared. I don't think they cared what was good for me. They just cared about what was good for them. And created a team that could deliver on what was good for them, and then gave themselves all of the kudos at the end of the day.
But how do we know? I got a question. How do we know? Because we're talking about creating the safe spaces, right, for conversation. How do we know that we have the ability to do that, and what makes us know that? Because you had brought something up, and it was kind of like a slow receiver on that. That you said something a little while ago, and you were saying that the places that you were having the safe conversations, or being able to have the safe conversations, are generally when people are not having them, they're being fake, right? And the situations of that, they're not really, being truthful with themselves, so they can't create those. So on the flip side of that, when are we able? Because I guess this is something that I always say, because every place I've gone to, any conversation I've had, I can't tell anybody how I create safe spaces. So I'm asking you, how do I create safe spaces? Just say it's not just me per se, because I always had that, because people always said that, even as a little child, people say, I would have older people telling me, sharing all kind of things with me, to their bless you, sharing all kind of things with me and talking to me and able to carry on conversations with me, right? So I never really understood why people felt comfortable telling me stuff. So in essence, I always was able to create safe spaces. So it was never a thing for me where I had to go out of my way to kind of figure out how this happened. When I entered into any conversation that I'm into, that's always created. So how do we create those if we're not an alien like me?
Well, yeah, I would not call you an alien. I think the experience of you, Carl Shawn, is that you are who you are, right? You're not trying to be perfect. Your ego doesn't win the day. You care about people, right? And this is not because you're doing a specific thing. We've talked about this a bunch in this series too, guys. It's not that there's like a specific list of tasks to do to create safe spaces for conversation. It's about being, as a human, safe for people to have a conversation with. And people can feel that in one interaction with you. And so one of the other things I want to share, because even in your work environment, right? So my management team, the management team I worked within, didn't feel safe for me to like fully express me. My team, however, I created that for my team. So I ran a sales and marketing team, and everybody was like completely comfortable coming to me. And like some of the things I did was allow them to come to me in ways that worked for them, right? Like I gave everybody in our weekly meeting an opportunity to provide feedback for me. But the more important thing is not the fact that I gave people the space to provide feedback. It's that my reaction to the feedback I wasn't offended. I wasn't angry. I wasn't whatever. I was open. I was open-minded. Like what? Okay. I got told multiple times I was a micromanager, right? And I have a streak of perfectionism, so that happens. But that's good feedback. But this also, like, I always took that as if they didn't feel safe, they wouldn't provide constructive feedback, right? And all of these people are providing this constructive feedback, which is making me a better manager. This is good for everybody. But you have to show up. You have to believe that, right? You have to show up and you have to initiate those conversations. And you have to be like, you know what? It seemed in this engagement that we were working on that you were really frustrated, and I'd like to understand more, because my job here is not to frustrate you. My job here is to empower you to do your best work. And so I don't want to do that. Can we talk about it? And sometimes people do it. Sometimes people are more comfortable providing it in written feedback, right? And that's fine. I'm not here to force you. I'm not going to force you to tell me in front of everybody what your problem was with me. I'm going to give you an opportunity to do that. But like, you don't have to do that. You can do it in the way that's comfortable for you. And that is what makes a space possible, right? Like I'm not imprinting, not really the word I want to use, but I'm not imprinting how I do things onto you to make it acceptable. You need to follow this exact process, and then I'll create a safe space for you, right? Like, no, that's not it. My job here is to create a safe space for you. Each individual person on your team is going to feel safe in a different way. And by you showing up and learning about them and understanding them, and those types of things, those actions, you being the person who actually cares about those people, just let those actions shine through, right? And a lot of times in corporate working environments, we have what people like to call golden handcuffs, right? So like, I'm going to get paid, but I got to do this, right?
Yes.
Projecting. Yes, that's the one.
Yes.
And it's that's when what we're doing is not what we would do, right? So one of the last things I want to leave everybody with is when you experience that. So when you experience a space that feels not safe, when you experience something about you where you feel like, oh, I don't know if I'm really creating a space that is safe for other people to come. And if you are one of those people, you guys, which I guess a lot of you are, where people just come and tell you things. I always remember this one scenario where I like ordered pizza, and the guy this is before COVID, delivered it to the door, and just like stood there telling me his entire life story. I think I gave him like a decent tip or something. And then he was so excited that because this is what he does to like fund his children's education. And I was like, I don't know what makes people tell me these things, but I think it's because they like, I give off an aura, let's say that, of non-judgment, right? Because that is what I believe. I don't believe that the guy who delivers my pizza is any less important than me. If he was not there, I would not have pizza, and that would suck.
That's important because I'm hungry.
Right? And so like the world is made up of people who need to work together in order to get stuff done. And I need every single person to do their job so I can do my job, right? Yes. And I like taking care of people. That's a thing I like. And some people don't like that, right? I remember my husband once telling me he used to manage people and now he doesn't anymore. And he was like, the mental calories, which is one of my words. And I love when he uses my words. One of the outstanding. The mental calories that I expend on like dealing with these people is I just don't want to do it. Right. And I'm like, oh, it's so interesting because that's like my favorite thing to spend mental calories on, is figuring out like what's going on with this person. How can I make them feel like, how can I take them from a state of like almost anxiety shock into a like area of calm, which is different again for each person. Right. So at the end of the day, what we're really coming back to is that concept of living your values. What are those things you believe, you guys? Show up like that. Continual projection. So yeah, imprinting.
Yeah, because imprinting is it's in the process of, right? So it's an ongoing thing. Yeah, great, man. I tell you, we got Alonzo. We appreciate you. We appreciate everybody that came by. This has been a great discussion, and hopefully, and I'm sure you have get some clarity upon creating the safe spaces. I brought the question up to Tracy and asked herself because I know she would detail it as far as there are no 1, 2, 3 steps. And though I've always questioned how that has been the case, I've never really got an answer as to why people feel safe telling me that. I've often heard what people have said uh, for their reason of why they felt okay telling me things or sharing with me or thinking that I was a soft pillow for their words to land a lot of times. And I take, I don't say pride. I take great care of that because it's a responsibility. And I think if we given that responsibility, we should definitely treat it as such. And I treat everyone the same, whether you're delivering my pizza, even if I'm not hungry, as Alex said, he's been that guy delivering pizza. Yes, Alex, I have been that guy delivering that as well through college. Domino's paid a lot of my weekend habits, so I definitely, I definitely agree with you on that.
See, and that quite honestly sounds way better than what I did, which was work in a call center. That was like so
Yeah. Especially on the
I
especially
at
on the
least love to
weekends,
have a
man. I
car
love
full of pizza smelling delicious,
yeah, Friday and
making people
Saturday
happy
night.
by
That was my
delivering
thing.
it.
Yeah, that was my thing. That was the extra tips was Friday and Saturday nights. I always made sure I got the weekend schedule. But when you we're happy for everyone that came by. We appreciate the conversation. We appreciate you guys chiming in. Uh Go somewhere for next are we next week or are we going on vacation next week? Are we
I don't know.
going
What do you want to do? We hadn't actually talked about it.
yeah, we haven't actually talked about that, but if we're not here next week, because I do think we might do a hiatus. I know that we have to do our production meeting because this is a productive show and we have to do production. So we want to be the best for you guys in 2022, and we're still lavishing and have to look over some of this outstanding information that took place in the bonanza. And I do want to bring up more of that and talk more of that about what went on. I would also like to do some paging of those that were in the bonanza to come and join us and talk about some of the things that they took away from that in the authentic part and the leadership part and the safe spaces part. Thank you, Anna, for sharing that. Safe spaces start when people feel respected and valued. I definitely agree with that. And that is why we don't have a lot of safe spaces. And that's why it is so hard for individuals who are not in the upper echelon of to create those. I think it's a little bit easier from the top down. I think it's much harder from the bottom up. That's
Well,
just
and
my
I
opinion.
think just one of the other things that I would like to say, because with this statement, it almost makes it sound like there's people who care about people and there's people who don't. And
Mhm.
I think by nature, we do all care about people. What we start to fail
I used to think
see,
that. I used to think that.
I know, like nothing is an
I
absolute, but
yeah.
what happens is when we start to see our actions pay off in different ways, right? So like I get the promotion or I get a raise or I get that job and blah, then it's our actions, the actions that we've taken to get a specific result or reach a certain goal are conflicting with that. And so because those are giving us the results, we continue to practice those things because those are the results we want. And so
they're
we're
not always good.
actually out of practice understanding how our actions are impacting humans. And we need to go back to the drawing board and ask ourselves, and you guys, this is like one of the key principle of authentic leadership is you have to go back to how is this impacting the people. And I believe there's going to be some people who are like too far gone now and don't want to ask themselves that question. I don't think you guys are those people. So if you are looking at yourself and your ability to create spaces for conversation, you are the kind of person who values people and their experiences. If your actions are not lining up with that today, look at your actions, right? How could you change your actions so they show other people that you care about them and their experiences? How could you show up when the pizza man delivers your pizza to show that you're excited that guy exists today? How could you do that? No, and I just took this. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, Tracy she just grabbed it.
I just
but
so I have this like deep belief that when we're all children, we care about people. And what happens in our lives teaches us to not. It's not safe to do so. It's not this, it's not that. I want to encourage you all to think that there definitely are. There's more people who are comfortable with meeting people where they are right now. And like, for example, I had a lady who reached out to me after the bonanza because she was like, how do you do that? one of the words she said was like, I think I'm just really judgmental. And I was like, what if you've just done a lot of practice judging people? What if you just had a lot of practice judging people? And before you thought that there was a lot of value associated with judging people. So that's what you did. And now all of a sudden you realize, ooh, maybe there's not that much value in judging people. And I don't have to do that to get ahead in my career. Because a lot of people, we're talking about leadership, right? A lot of people make these trades because they think that's what it takes to get ahead in their career. And when you play that back and you're like, ooh, maybe that is what has gotten me ahead, but am I really ahead? Right? Like I quit a senior vice presidency job. I quit it because I was ahead in my career and it crushed my soul every day. So there's a lot of things, but then we get into the practice and then it's easy, right? Actually, I posted about this earlier today about like, you're worth more than easy. And having these types of conversations about moving yourself to getting more comfortable, meeting people where they are, because today you're not happy. I'm worth more than that, right? The work to get there isn't easy work to do, and you have to practice all of those things that Michael shared earlier: transparency, vulnerability, objective listening, and emotional maturity. You guys got to practice those things. You have to practice. So you need to find a safe space for you to go and practice those skills. Great. And then once you get good at practicing those skills, you get to have a lot more control over where those conversations can go
and where they lead to. Thank you guys so much. It's been a lovely conversation.
I get very passionate about this.
Yeah, she gets passionate about that.
Need a place to practice, please talk to either me or Carl, Shawn, about the Your Business Peeps community.
The Your Business Peeps community is definitely a place
that is exactly what it is made for.
Yes.
Conversations. It's about you using your voice. It is, like, quite honestly, it's not one of those, it's not a LinkedIn group where you're going to get a whole bunch of like online content, or you're going to get
workshops and all of that. No, I mean, you get workshops.
You're going to come and you're going to be in conversation with other people who care about the same things you care about. And so if that's how you build these skills, you guys, it doesn't happen any other way. So if that is something that is on your to-do list for 2022, please reach out to one of us.
Yes, please do, guys. We thank you guys so much for showing up. We thank you guys for engaging in the comments. Kenny, Alex, Dan, Lygia, Jeff, and Anna, and Alonzo. We appreciate you guys. Thank you for coming and joining and making it a pleasurable conversation. We thank you guys for sharing your stories and sharing your segments and your thoughts with us, and we appreciate you. We can't have this show without you, and we thank you guys for engaging. Also, for those who are going to be watching the replay, put in the comments your thoughts and answer the question: Are where you're working at, where you are, maybe you're a leader, are you actually creating safe spaces for conversation where you are, or are there safe spaces being created? Or have you ever even thought about where I'm at? Can I even talk safely and say what's safely on, what's on my mind? So if any of those things rolling through your head, and as you shake your head, it makes a lot of noise like screws loose, then definitely put it in the comments and let us know. We do go back and check on the hashtag replay, and we will see you guys.
One last thing. It's a week of Christmas, and therefore what Tracy does is wear Christmas sweaters all week. So I just got to show everybody
she's Radio City Rockette Radio City Rockette sweater.
Today.
I don't have ugly sweater on. I just got on the regular one. Sorry.
Tomorrow to find out what I'm wearing tomorrow.
She has a new one on tomorrow. Thank you guys. We appreciate you guys. You guys have a wonderful evening, and everybody have a wonderful holiday, because Christmas will have been passed before we see you guys again. So you guys stay safe. Remember, the virus is out there. Bundle up, mask up, the whole nine. Whatever you need to take to be safe around your family. Be safe. Take those precautions, and we look forward to seeing you guys again next week. Y'all have a lovely one, and as me and Tracy say good night.
Good night.
Good night. Okay.